Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach. And up next, elite marathoner and coach Andrea Pomaranski discusses returning to the sport and the role of urgency. And after that, the world of running updates about Commonwealth Games, Diamond League, and shoes. Don't forget, the most important thing you can do to get involved with the show is to share a question about your training and running experiences. Of course, the reason we do that is because we have found that the most valuable thing we can do on the podcast is to talk about the things that you are thinking about. But the only way to know what you're thinking about, if we are discounting my capacity for mind reading, which I'm fairly good at in general, but we need you to tell us. And the best way for you to do that is to go to AtoZrunning.com/question so you can submit any questions about running, training, other things on your mind, running related, and then we will answer them at the end of the month in our end of month Q&A episode. And if that's not timely enough, by the way, we also answer them in a reply in the email if it's a timely question and you need a more immediate answer than that too.
And maybe we might not be able to get to it on the show, or we've already answered it in some capacity recently. So we'll respond to you, and hopefully we can even connect with you that way. So yeah, good reasons both direction.
And I think the most important part of all of that and why we do it in this way is because even though your question might be the same question someone else has asked, it may not be the same situation.
Yeah, that's
Very
true.
rarely is.
Yep.
So the context does define the answer to some degree or another, certainly the nuance. And so ask the question, even if it's something that you feel like we've already answered or discussed in other contexts. It may be different for you. There you go. AtoZrunning.com/question.
Or you can just message us or DM me on Instagram. I'm there as well. Now, I do have a promotion again this week, and that's the hip hook from Aletha Health. And you can get a discount using the code ATOZ, A to Z, if you need hip flexor relief. So it's great for triggering or having the trigger release of those points or hard to reach places. So the hip hook helps with that, and it's been helping me immensely, and it might help you too. So go to Aletha Health and look at that hip hook and use code ATOZ.
Easy to remember because the hip hook helps heal hard to reach places.
You're trying to think of an H.
It'd be great if it started with an H, but it didn't.
Awesome. Well, now let's get on to our main topic. This week, our main topic is patience with urgency. Now, we're talking to Andrea Pomaranski about her return to running, and she shared a lot of great insight when it comes to her own journey, but I think that it has a lot of value to all of us as we listen. And one of those big things was having patience with urgency. And to understand that, you're going to have to listen to the episode. Now, a little bit about Andrea. She's an elite runner, now a masters runner, newly masters. She just turned 40.
She's newly mastered.
Yes, she's a new master. And coach at Team Run Run. And we'll let Andrea tell like her whole story, but I did want to give you a couple stats on her because it's pretty fun. Andrea took the USATF road racing circuit by storm this year with an overall 4th place finish in the circuit. And this is her first time doing.
Is the circuit done?
Yeah. Well, at least they had the listing of like where the placement is. So she's 4th. If it's not completed, she's 4th right now.
Well, 4th at the moment. Either way. That's good.
And this is her first time doing any of the championship races. So super impressive in her first ever showing. She was 2nd in the championship half marathon, 5th in the 25K, and 10th in the 6K. And at 39 and 40 years old, like I mentioned, this is her first time racing the circuit. And she was also 10th American in the Boston Marathon in her first pro start at a marathon major at the age of 39 in 2021. Pomaranski ran a half marathon PR this year. Marathon PR this year in Houston, running 2:33:38. We're going to talk a lot about that on the show. And this time qualifies her for her 3rd U.S. Olympic Trials marathon. Very impressive. I am going to post on AtoZrunning.com more of her running resume, so you're going to want to make sure you check that out. Just a lot of fun info there with some of her personal best times. But the last thing I wanted to mention was a mile PR she also got this year. So she got her marathon PR, but then also her mile PR, and it's a pending Masters American record.
All
so
right.
yeah, and it's we're pretty sure it's going to go through because she did a lot of research as to which races she would do. But she ran 4:45, and that one she didn't know for sure if it was going to get the record. But then she ran a 4:47 at one that she knew had all the certifications it needed. So
this is a road mile.
This is a road mile record.
Okay.
Yeah. So fast. She was a collegiate runner, and this is her fastest mile she's ever run.
Nice.
And you probably are wondering, how did that happen? How did this all come to be? Well, we have Andrea on the show today, so we're going to get to talk about it. So let's get to our conversation with Andrea Pomaranski. Hi, Andrea. Welcome to the A to Z Running podcast.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
We are so excited to have you on the show. I've been following your running career very closely recently. It actually first happened at the LMCU Bridge Run 10 mile, and you're listed as anonymous runner on there. So I had to know, who is this like super fast anonymous runner?
Yeah, it was funny. I don't know exactly how I became the anonymous runner, but I don't know how to fix it. So if anybody knows how to fix that, let me know.
Yeah, Run Sign Up needs to be able to have a way for you to contact them to fix that. But that was like how it was very mysterious. It actually might work for like some sort of PR move. Who is the anonymous runner? She's so good.
It was
She's
unintentional,
so fast.
but
very fun. Anyway, so from there, I found you on Instagram. That sounds so creepy. And I've been following your amazing running since then, but it didn't start there. And I'd love at the beginning of this episode to just have you share your running journey with all of us. And we'll kind of like discuss as we go. But in this episode, we want to talk about the return that you've had to running and some of your amazing perspectives that I've heard you share that I think can be so valuable to all of our listeners. So Andrea, would you mind just telling us a little bit about your running journey?
Yeah, so I started running in high school. I was never really like a national standout, but I was good enough to earn a scholarship to run in college. And in college, I was a bit more of a standout, but again, I was never really the type of athlete that was like vying for a national championship or anything like that. So, 20 years ago, there probably wasn't quite the number of opportunities that there are now to run post-collegiately. So I just thought that was the end of the road for me in terms of competitive running. So at the time, I got a job in corporate America, and then I later started following around my husband, who was playing pro hockey. And we had just a lot of fun, almost too much fun, because then when he proposed, I found myself just feeling kind of like really out of shape and not quite like myself. And also I just kind of wanted to look good in my wedding dress. So I started running again. And I was having some trouble finding the motivation to work out consistently every day with kind of just that end in itself. I like having, goals to work towards and to help me get out the door. So I signed up for a half marathon, which at the time was kind of this big, scary goal for me. I don't think I had ever run 13 miles before. And that was something that excited me, but yet also to where I wasn't comparing myself to my previous times that I had run in college, because I didn't really want to get discouraged. I just wanted it to be fun, and I wanted to just get in shape. So I had signed up for the half marathon, and I think my goal was to just run under an hour and 30 minutes. To me, that felt like I was pushing myself, but it wasn't too far beyond at the time what I was capable of. So I ended up running I think a 129 something, just barely got under an hour and 30 minutes. And to this day, it's probably one of the most painful races that I've ever run in my whole entire life. It was so hard. But once I got over that, that feeling of actual pain, I really kind of fell in love with it again, and setting a goal and hitting it, and the process of improvement of getting there. And that was about the time where I had found out about, the allure of Boston. I didn't really know much about Boston before that. And I had found out that you had to qualify to get in, which I thought was just like the coolest thing. So then I set a goal of running a full marathon, and my goal was to try to qualify for Boston. And like at that time, like I thought that was like the pinnacle of running, like qualifying for Boston. What can you possibly do after you qualify for Boston?
Uh-huh.
So so I trained for a few more months, and I ended up qualifying for Boston. I ran, I think, like a 2:58 at the New York City Marathon, which was pretty cool. I snuck under 3 hours. And then at that time, I got more involved with a running group. I thought, if I'm going to do Boston, I want to do it well. And I kind of connected with a running group, which was such a blessing, because some of the people that I met in that running group are still my best friends to this day. And it not only made me better, but it made it so much more fun, and made the sport just so much more fun, connecting and working with other people. And I think that's part of the reason why I did improve so much at the time. And this was 10 or 12 years ago. So I ended up running, I think, like a 2:52 at Boston. And then at that point, I thought, well, I improved a lot. Like, what if I keep doing this and see what else I can do? So I ended up 6 months later running a 2:41 at the Twin
Wow.
Cities Marathon, which qualified me for the Olympic trials, which was just kind of opened up my eyes to this whole new world, like the Olympic trials. And I just cut off so much time. I was with this group, and we were having a lot of fun training. So I kept doing it. And 3 months after that, I ended up running a 2:37. And then I just kind of kept the ball rolling. And that fall, I was probably in shape to run maybe in the low 2:30s. And I was in the middle of the Chicago Marathon. I was having a pretty intense amount of pain in my chest. So I ended up dropping out. And a week later, I found out that I had 2 broken ribs. And a week after that, my doctor sat me down in his office and said, "Look, you have osteoporosis. It doesn't look good. Your competitive running days are probably over, but eventually you'll probably be able to run a couple miles again if you stop now and kind of take care of your body." So I did that. It was hard, but yeah, I think the real goal for my husband and I was to have a family. So we did that. We focused on, just getting healthy and starting a family. So we ended up a couple years later getting pregnant with our first set of twins. And honestly, in a really kind of tragic, and at the time, like what felt like a very devastating way, we ended up losing both of them. They were born very prematurely. We ended up losing one son the day that they were born, and then spent the next 5 months every day in the NICU with our other son, until he eventually contracted a virus and ended up passing away from that. And at the time, it was just a very dark period of my life. I thought, I just felt like there was nothing to go on for. It was I tried to put on a show to everybody else, like I was fine and I was healing and everything was okay, but inside I just felt like that was it. Like there was just nothing to go on for. And it really wasn't until we ended up about a year later getting pregnant with our 2 daughters, Annabelle and Zella, who are now vibrant and zesty and full of life. But it really wasn't until we found out that we were pregnant with them until I started to see a little bit of, like there's light ahead. And so I don't know if anybody's listening to this, just to know that if you're finding yourself in a really dark place, there is so much light ahead. And I found that, I realize that now. And at the time I didn't see it, but yeah, just there's so much good ahead. So we had our girls. They're beautiful, they're healthy. And then about a year and a half later, we had our third child, our son, Cooper. I think because of everything that we had gone through with our boys, our first set of twins, I felt like, 100% of like my life and my time had to be dedicated to these children. And for a couple of years, it very much felt like that. It was like, I loved it. And we had these 3 beautiful children. I was so grateful. And then when my son was about 2, I just felt like I wanted to do like kind of like something that filled up my own cup again. It felt like I was kind of pouring out everything into, other people. And I just felt like this, kind of this pull to do something for me again. And I had always enjoyed running, so I started to run. And and I love also, like I love setting these like big dreamy goals, and then kind of chipping away at them. That's very satisfying to me. And that, in a way, I know it probably sounds crazy, but that fills up my own cup, is to set like this big scary goal and then just go after it. That's what lights me up inside. That's what is I find very satisfying, is like just that process of like striving for something. And I didn't want to do any short stuff. And moving my body also is a way for me to fill up my own cup. So I knew I wanted to do something physical. And I didn't want to run a marathon, because I thought there's no way like I'm ever going to be in shape to run a 2:37 marathon ever again. There's no way I could never get back in that shape.
That's funny looking back on that, huh?
Right. Well, and especially with 3 kids. And in my mind, I'm like, nor do I want to. Like, that took too much effort. It's too much work. I don't want to go there. And I don't want to run a marathon, but I want to do something that's physical, and it's this big, scary, dreamy goal. And it was always on my bucket list to do an Ironman.
Which wasn't as scary to you, which is funny.
Well, yeah, I thought, well, it's just, if I can just finish it, like there's not any time goals, but yet it seems fun. Like, why not? And then when I'm done, I can say I finished an Ironman. And thank God bless my husband. I convinced him to do a half with me, to see what it was like. And then I later on did go on to do the full. And in that process, I loved working out, but I can kind of tolerate biking. I love going downhill really fast on the bike. I think it's fun. I didn't really like swimming that much. I like splashing around in the pool with my kids, and that's about it. So getting in the pool was really difficult for me, but I just I love running so much. And I thought that I was, in the process of training for it, I thought, I was in pretty good shape, but at the end of the marathon, you run like a 4-hour marathon and you have nothing left. So I just wanted to do one standalone marathon, and I thought that would be it. But I ended up coming 3rd in the Detroit Marathon and running, I think, like a 2:51. And I just kind of fell in love with that process all over again. And then I found out 4 months later that the Olympic trials marathon was going on. And I thought, like, I have nothing to lose. Why not just see what I can do for 3 months, train really hard for 3 months, because I don't want to look back on this moment and think, what if? So I ended up working really hard for 3 months, and I just barely qualified on the very last day for the trials. I ran with under a minute. I think I ran a 2:44. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. Like, once I got to the trials, and I think I was ranked maybe like 500 and something going into it, and it finished like 140 something.
Whoa.
Yeah, but just being around that energy, and I remember like looking at my husband and thinking like, man, I was just breastfeeding, and like we were both just like cleaning up, poopy diapers yesterday, and now I'm competing with the best like athletes in the world. Like, it just blew my mind. And more than that, I think just seeing so many moms, it kind of gave me, all along I'd thought in my mind, like, why am I doing this? I'm a mom of 3. I have no business doing this, running, training, pushing my body hard, like, for what? And I think just seeing so many moms out there doing the same thing kind of just it gave me permission that it was okay. And that there were other people that felt the same way I did, that for whatever reason wanted to fill up their cup, or just felt good pushing their bodies or whatever. It allowed me a bit of peace around, wanting to strive and hit goals again. So after that, I ended up getting a coach, and thank goodness, because then the pandemic hit. So it was such a blessing, not only to have a really great coach helping me, but also someone to keep me accountable throughout the pandemic, which helped just tremendously. And then out, like coming out of the pandemic, I was actually in better shape because, during that time, it gave me this kind of outlet during so many, tumultuous things going on in the outside world. It was something that I could control, that I had to look forward to. So I ended up coming out of the pandemic in better shape than I went in. And then at Grandma's, I ran a 2:37, and then it was like a 10-second PR. And then I ran another 10-second PR at Boston. And then 3 months after that, or 11, 10, 11, 12, 1, 3 months after that, I ran a 4-minute PR at Houston. And it's just kind of been snowballing since. So it's just this whole like process of, oh, well, I did this. If I keep working, like what else can I get a little bit faster? And it's just that process of striving and improving that I've really just fallen in love with. And I think that's why I've seen the improvement that I have, is because, it's not like I set out with, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and it's going to take me 3 years to do it, but I'm going to stick my nose in and grind. It's like every couple months, it's like, oh, well, I did that. Like, what else can I do? So it's just really just that process of improvement, and has kind of landed me in the spot that I'm in now.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that and sharing your heart. And like, I know it's not easy to talk about the darkest periods in our lives. And I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing that with us, really opening yourself up, because a lot of us have been in some really dark moments. And to hear your journey, and then this way that you're able to fill up so you can pour out through running and finding this joy again and chasing after some big goals. We love to hear all of that. And I think a lot of our audience can resonate with bits and pieces of your story. We might not be quite as fast as you, but we can resonate with different parts of your story and why running really helps us through our journey.
Oh, absolutely. And the most enjoyable and satisfying part of all of this has been just like the people that the sport has brought into my life, some of my best friends, and just the way in which like my family has showed up for me is just like almost like brings me to tears. My parents, my in-laws, it's like, oh, well, I think I kind of want to do this race again. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Like how can we help? When do you want to drop off the kids? And just seeing, my husband kind of support me throughout this process too. With 3 kids, I know it's not always the easiest, but he always shows up and helps and supports me. I feel so grateful to have the support that I have, because there's no way with 3 kids that I could do this without a huge support team and community. So it's just been, it's been an unexpected surprise.
It's a beautiful thing to do it together, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I'm hearing you say too is that goal of having it be something that you enjoyed and having it be that piece of yourself kind of stayed as like a primary goal with these other challenges that you built upon as you progressed.
Setting just goals and incentives along the way. I mean, with each workout, it's like, okay, this is the goal I have for this workout, and that kind of progresses each week. And then your goal for the season, and it progresses each season. You get that one maybe, and then you set a little bit bigger one. But something, I think there's this, each athlete, we're trying to get in this state of flow, right? And it's setting a goal that's maybe just beyond your reach, but within your reach. And I tried to do that with each season. I'm not setting one that's way far above what I'm capable of, because then it's not fun. And if I don't get it, then I'm discouraged and I want to quit. Right. So I think it's setting reasonable goals, but something that's maybe just out of your reach that you're still striving for.
And as you were returning, I'm kind of going back to the beginning phases where you're learning to love it again. You are having that piece of yourself that's back. It helps you feel more alive, more of yourself, because you're pouring out, right, in your daily life. How are you able to do that healthily, that progression of coming back to running healthily? Were there routines that you were doing? What was your mindset around training in general? Or were you just getting out for a run in the little bits that you could here and there? What was that like?
I think you have to be kind of methodical when you're coming back, because you don't want to go too soon, too fast, because then you'll get injured and you're right back at square one. And so I think, I had some kind of ideas in my head of what I wanted to kind of touch on. And I think I mentioned this before we started recording. And then I was listening to your podcast on my long run yesterday, and about the 9 things, that you want to do or not do in running. And the first two things that you and Zach had mentioned were two out of the three things that have really helped me on the way. And it was consistency and patience. And I think it's just so important to kind of reiterate what you had mentioned. And you did such a good job of like saying how important and why they were important. But I think it's just setting like a schedule and being really consistent about that schedule, but knowing that maybe those big long-term goals you have are just, they're not going to come right away, but they will. You just have to be patient. And it's going to sound kind of counterintuitive, or kind of like opposite, but my third one was a sense of urgency. It kind of, sense of urgency and patience, you wouldn't necessarily think that they go hand in hand, but they do. So it's, I think, from the day to day, having a sense of urgency of, okay, this is what I need to do today to get me to those goals, to where I want to be, but also having that sense of patience to know that it's not going to come right away. But if you just keep at it, eventually you'll find yourself hitting those goals. So
I love that. And that's such a great piece to add in there, like super important, because what we're doing, even though it takes a long time, it matters. The routine that we're doing matters.
Yep. Yeah. And it's easy to think, oh, like I'm going to have the patience. I'm not, but you still need to have that. Okay, like what do I need to do today? And then do it. And yeah, so I think that's so important. Even when you're even when you're injured, it's like, okay, like what kind of rehab can I do right now? Or like I have this pain in my shin or my foot, like what rehab exercises can I do like right now, so that tomorrow, like I feel better and I can go out for that run or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. It makes a lot of sense to me right now, doing a lot of rehab work.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't love this rehab, but I love running so much that I'm willing to do all this rehab.
I know it's harder to have to do those things when you're injured than it is to just go out for your run.
But it all matters. And the day-to-day, the sense of urgency, like today I need to do this. This is something that's important, and it's a long game, both literally and figuratively for us long distance runners, but it truly is. Right. I'm glad that you added that to the perspective. So thinking about your journey, what are some of the unexpected or maybe expected blessings and rewards of returning to running?
Well, I would say like the biggest blessings and rewards are always, and for me, like the people that the sport has brought into my life, it's just, oh my gosh, it's just, I mean, like my best friends, and I couldn't do any of this without, like, I mean, my family, how they show up for me is unbelievable. My support system. And just, I think in doing this, realizing just how much like support and like the love that my family has for me, that they, they want me to succeed and do well. And they show up, and it's like, if I go for if I have a trip planned, my parents and my husband's parents are both like, hey, I'll take the kids. What can I do? And my husband's so supportive, and just, just feeling that love they have, that they're all willing to help out, and they're so encouraging is wonderful. And then just my best friends are, a result of, they've been brought into my life because of sport. So that's probably the biggest blessing that has come out of this, without a doubt, the people. But then also, like, I think setting a good example for my kids, showing them that you can work hard at something, and the harder you work at something, the better you are, and showing them, leading by example for them, I think. And then also just like, I think carving out some time for myself to do something that kind of fills up my cup and lights me up inside has been a blessing for me. I really struggled very deeply with mom guilt. I thought that if I did anything for myself, then maybe I was being a bad mom, or very early on. And I had to work through a lot of that and realize that filling up my own cup is good for my kids too. So that has been, it was a very big challenge for me early on, and it's easier now, but still something that I think I'll always kind of struggle with.
And I think that resonates with so many of us, no matter what the situation is in general. It's hard to prioritize because, one, it's not as measurable when it comes to our mental and emotional wellness. I think that a lot of times we don't we aren't able to fully grasp how important that is in our day to day and how it helps us function in our other responsibilities. And so then we end up rushing, and we have this mindset that, we're just checking things off of our list. And then there's no room for our health, or there's no room for our run or our mobility routine or what have you, because we don't see it as the important thing that it can truly be to help us have a thriving life. And I love seeing you on Instagram posting about your mom and your kids and your life, that you have this full, beautiful, thriving life, and how running truly can aid to it. And it's so wonderful to hear you articulate that component of the meaningfulness of running in your life.
Oh, 100%. And I think of it, I read in a book somewhere, I love this analogy. It's like, think of yourself as a vase, right? And if you're tipping this way and you're tipping that way and you're tipping and you're trying to fill up everybody else's cup, and eventually that vase is going to kind of swirl around and then like tumble and crash, right? But if you just kind of stand still and you fill up your own vase with water, then it just overflows out into everybody around you. And I feel like in a way, that's how, like, doing this thing for myself, I feel like in a way I'm able to kind of overflow more to other people, because I'm taking care of myself and I'm carving out this time for me where I do, it's like a meditation. Like I think about things and I have some time for myself. And then when I come back, it's like, oh, I'm better. Like my cup is filled. I can give more to the people around me. So I think that's definitely one of the unexpected blessings that I've had about doing this. And I'm one of those people, I think, like, it just, moving my body in some way just does so much for, not only my physical health, but my mental health as well. So it's just really important for me to be able to do that.
Yeah. Same. And I bet a lot of our listeners right now are nodding and they're like, yes, that's why I did it. I needed this reminder today. So thank you for sharing that very much. So, so I guess along the same lines, we're talking a lot right now about perspective and the mindset of running. Were there any changes throughout your running career, or the times that you weren't running, that changed your mindset or helped you solidify your mindset and perspective in things?
For sure. I think just being more grateful that I can do this. I mean, I just feel so much more lucky. I don't take it for granted, and not that I did before, but even more so now. Like when you're injured, you feel it so deeply. Like, I wish I could just go out for a run pain free. And I think doing it this time around, I just feel so much more grateful that I'm even able to do this. Right. Yeah. And I think from a mindset perspective, just seeing things that, I used to think things happen for a reason. And I still think that, but I think to kind of piggyback on that, it's like things are happening, if you heard the quote, things are happening not to you, but for you. And I think just being able to see the good in like, so I could have been really upset that this injury happened to me, right? Or I could choose to say, okay, how am I going to grow from this? Or how am I going to create good out of this, right? So now it's like I'm more appreciative because that had happened to me, and I try to just let it grow into making me a better person.
Yeah, that's a beautiful perspective. Yep. To redeem all those hard things, they can be redeemed into good things and things that we can grow. And that doesn't mean that the bad thing was a good thing. It just means that we can make good things from the bad thing. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I didn't really say it the right way. You said it much more.
No, you said it beautifully. You said it beautifully. I'm just adding to it. So with this attitude of gratitude, you ran a 2:33 marathon, and I would love to hear how that unfolded for you. If you wouldn't mind, our audience loves to hear about races. So can you tell us about that race?
Yeah. It was quite cold, I think. And that was the day that Kira D'Amato set the American record. So it was obviously a really good day, but I remember being a little nervous about it, even though you'd think I wouldn't be because I'm from Michigan. But I think the feels like temperature was maybe 28 degrees and it was quite windy. So I didn't know how it was going to play out. And it was funny, everybody else, and I'm from Michigan, everybody else had, their short shorts on, and they're kind of tank tops. And I had like knee high socks on. I had tights on. I had 2 long sleeve shirts on. I had a the vest on, and I just kept kind of stripping clothes as like the race went on. But and I remember even the first mile, I felt like my feet were numb, so I didn't really know. I mean, I knew I was in really good shape, but in 2:33 kind of shape, but I didn't know how it was going to play out because it was a bit windy. But yeah, I felt good, and I kind of settled in with a really big pack, and kind of tried to tuck in as much as I could in that pack because it was so windy. And then the last 6 or 7 miles, I felt really good with about 6 or 7 to go, and I was hitting the fastest miles that I had the whole race. And then the last mile or two was just kind of hang on. But yeah, it was probably one of the more fun races I'd ever run, because I ended up connecting with another couple of runners, and as long as we could, we kind of chat it, or just little things here and there, and we ended up getting along really well. And yeah, I just love this sport. It's just so much fun. Like the people you meet along the way just makes it so worthwhile. But yeah, it was a really fun race.
And a really fast one too.
Yeah,
That would be exciting. Yeah.
It was so exciting. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't wait for Zach to listen to this conversation, because I'm very similar to you, where I really love running near other runners. Like it actually makes me feel we're working together. And
Yes.
so I really, really enjoy that. And he's more of a competitive nature, so it helps him. He likes it for the sense of like helping urge him on. But like, I feel like we're all a team. Like when I'm running in a marathon, I'm like, we're all trying to run fast, and, so,
yeah, it's funny.
It's nice to hear you say that too.
That perspective, I definitely have that perspective now. I didn't always. I think when I was younger, I was very much more competitive. Like, well, I need to be number one, or I want to beat you. Now it's, let's all work together as a team. And if we all do great, we all do great. It's definitely more of a team thing for me as well. And the last couple marathons that I did, I kind of got stuck in no man's land. And this one was just made such a big difference. I mean, it was more pleasurable. It felt easier to run with the pack. And yeah, it makes a big difference.
Absolutely. So I guess my final question for now is what would you say to someone who is thinking about returning? Maybe they've had a few months or a year or maybe 9 years where they haven't been in this sport. What would you want to say to them?
One thing I would say is just like the importance of setting goals, like long-term goals, but really important is the short-term goals, whether it's a week or a month. Like what can you do on a day-to-day to get your week goal, and then your month goal, and then your season goal, and then but always keep that really big goal in the back of your mind, because that kind of lights your fire too, right? It's down the road. Like it's what's, maybe you don't want to get out the door for your run or a second run that day, but if you kind of think, oh, well, I have this really big goal, like a year from now, what do I need to do today to get that goal? It's, if you think about that, then it'll kind of give you the motivation to do what you need on a daily basis. But I think also like the little things really add up to big things too. And that's what we were saying kind of with the consistency piece. And I think what has allowed me to be consistent over the last couple years is taking care of the little things, especially now that I just turned 40 this month. So now that I'm a quote unquote like a master's runner, I think it's even more important to take care of those little things. Like sleep is huge. Eating well is so big. I don't think I could do what I'm doing now if I didn't really nourish my body, not only with enough foods, but the right kinds of foods, right? So like, I mean, and I'm not trying to say I'm like perfect. I'm human just like everybody else, but I think trying to really focus on as much as I can doing really like real whole foods, like there's a big difference between 100 calories of French fries or 100 calories of like wild blueberries, right? So like really nutritionally foods that are like nutritional powerhouses. And then I think, making sure you're getting enough protein, like especially to repair your muscles, especially if you're injured. And then a strength routine is really important too. Coming back just to make sure that your body can build the way that you want it to build. And I think the structure of mileage is really important too, being really smart about being consistent, like running at the same time each day and building slowly rather than adding too much and getting set back. So yeah, I don't know. Those are things probably everybody knows about, but I think just to reiterate, they're important.
I think they're very practical. And I think that a lot of us know we need to make time for those things, the little things like you're saying, and making those choices with urgency. I like that you put it that way, making these choices with urgency, knowing that they matter, even though it takes a long time to see the fruition. For us to hear that, I think sometimes it takes it a few times. I'm not the only one. I know some of you guys are listening and you're like, I'm with you, Andy. Sometimes it takes a few times to hear something and to really, to buckle down, to get the discipline, to do the little things and to do it correctly and help this whole journey of returning. It's about, our mental and our physical health that we were talking about before, and finding that space for ourselves and filling our cup. But if we can do that in a way that feels better and we're able to be better runners, that's going to just make the whole experience that much better.
Yeah. And really at the end of the day, it's about like fun. I mean, keeping it fun. And, I wouldn't be where I'm at and I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't enjoy myself and if it didn't add to my life. And if it gets to the point where it's adding stress or it's detracting from your life, then maybe it's time to rethink your goals, and if your goal is just to, go out and run for 20 or 30 minutes a couple of days a week for your mental health, that there's nothing wrong with that. I thrive kind of an environment where I am setting these like big dreamy goals, and then I'm doing things every day to go after them. Like that kind of helps me, but if it helps you to just run 20 minutes and then just to get some endorphins flowing, then there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's important too, to decide like, what are your goals, whether they're big or just for physical health, and there's nothing wrong with either one of them.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for coming on the show. We could keep talking for a really long time. I can feel that. So I so appreciate you coming on and connecting with us here at AtoZrunning and our audience. We've loved having you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. And I love your show. And like, I think I said this before you press record, but it's such an honor to be on your show with the quality of guests that you have. It's just, I appreciate you having me on so much.
Thank you, Andrea. That was such a great conversation that had a lot about goal setting, and it had very practical stuff when it comes to returning to running after a long period of time off. I loved what she said, and we teased it. It's the name of this episode, but the patience with a sense of urgency, and how she brings those two together. I think that is so valuable. I thought it was brilliant, really, the way that she put it, because I think a lot of times when we think of being patient, we just sit on things maybe a little too much, and we don't have the same kind of excitement, like get up in the morning and get going. And every day has importance. And for her, as she discussed loving the process, we talk about that a lot on the show, loving the process, she was able to get to her goals because she maintained a sense of urgency while being patient with herself and setting realistic and incremental goals throughout her journey.
So if the keys to success previously were consistency and consistency and patience, then we need to also add urgency.
I think so.
I don't mind doing that. And as a matter of fact, we're going to have to update our rules to realizing your dreams.
That's what she was referring to on the podcast. Did you?
She listened to that?
Yeah, she did. She listened to that episode, and she said, that was, she was going to say those two things, and then we said them on that episode.
So she couldn't
as she was reflecting.
Ours.
Well, and then she was able to expound upon it and then give us this really valuable nugget of having this sense of urgency and being disciplined each day to do what we can and have that. We have to be patient because it does take a long time, but what I do today really does matter. So having that, and we're going to talk next week then a little bit more with actually a medical professional about this and how it pertains to returning to running as well. So you're going to want to make sure you subscribe and listen to that show too.
That's good. If I can riff on the urgency piece just a moment too, in my own experiences.
Are you gonna also put it into
Andy,
some
just
sort
needs
of?
to talk about something.
I was hoping for more
of a
performance
so
from you.
if I may, because it's true that there's a combination involved here, and I tend to notice that interval experience when you're kind of going in and out of different phases of things. When the urgency slackens, the consistency becomes more difficult. And the urgency isn't an urgency to see progress, although we tend to be tempted to feel that urgency. It's not an urgency to be successful, although again, we tend to feel that urgency. Where I find the urgency to be the most productive, and this is what she was talking about, is that sense of like needing to be consistent. Like the urgency is to fall into the pattern and then hold it as closely as you can reasonably do so within the balance. And I think that's a valuable thing because it creates a sense of like, if there's a disruption, because there will be, there's always going to be disruptions. And so when those disruptions occur, then my urgency is trying to demand that I get back into the routine and rhythm as effectively and soon, as quickly as possible. And so that's a key piece. Now, the challenge is how that can be done without compromising life's balances and things like that. And so, so that's very difficult. And I think that we have to have the priorities aligned for that. That's a great conversation going back to the passion paradox. We always refer to that book because it's a great read on these concepts. But when Stolberg and Magnus are writing about that balance of the all-in mindset versus not having the all-in mindset and how sometimes it's more like a seasonal kind of experience, I think it also has to do with aspects of things. So like I'm all-in committed to having a routine. That does not necessarily mean that the routine is all-consuming. And that's difficult.
And I think it's so interesting as you're talking about this. I think this is another practical thing that our audience can take away. I certainly can. That when you have this, you talked about that all-in mindset for consistency. The wonderful thing about doing that is that then it becomes a habit and you don't have to feel like it's all in. And then you could have urgency that brings you to another aspect of your training. And so then you're not, that's the cool thing about continuing to have the consistency over time is that you keep refining your process. And yeah, I think because routines then become habits, I think that's what I'm trying to get at here. And then it's not as hard to do that. It's not as hard to do the things that you've been doing day in and day out.
That is good. The other reason why you need urgency is because you need to be urgently interested in learning more about these concepts. And this is a very sincere comment. I'm not just tongue-in-cheek advertising our products and such, but the urgency toward like, I shouldn't ever be content with my current level of understanding of a thing that I'm, highly invested in. So certainly we're not going to pursue deep levels of understanding of every single thing in life because we don't have the time to do that. But if I am really invested in running, for example, I shouldn't do so with a stagnant level of understanding and engagement with the ideas. I should be pursuing greater sense of how do I do this well? How do I do this efficiently and effectively? All of that. So there's that too. And a great way to satisfy that urgency is to listen to the AtoZrunning podcast and pursue some of our other things, which we'll talk about soon. But we've got some interesting updates to share with you from the world of running next.
This week in the world of running, we're starting again with some A to Z runner shout outs. Aaron ran the Trans Rockies multi-stage event.
Multi-stage.
118 miles.
Over 6 days?
It was, Zach, you put me on the spot. I think it was 6 days.
It was 6 days.
It was
Monday
5
through
or 6
Saturday.
Days. Okay.
Yeah.
And she was 5th overall.
All right.
Major props to Aaron.
Nice job.
Incredible. Christy and Dan O ran the Riley Trails Half Marathon, and Dan O was first in his age group, and Lewis ran the marathon as part of his training. And then Bill, he landed a podium in another 5K, which I feel like we say every other weekend.
He's been top 3 in every single race he's run in the last 3 months. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, and he got a new shiny 5K PR.
Shiny.
Yeah.
Don't know how a PR shines, but nice work, Bill.
Nice work, Bill. Congrats.
And it was a milestone PR at that, which is always exciting. Good stuff. All right. These are fun times. Speaking of fun times, the Diamond League is back after some championship stuff going on through the middle of the summer. And Diamond League's now going to help us close out the summer and early fall and with some exciting track action. This from Poland in their first Diamond League appearance. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. This meeting was not a Diamond League before, but it is now.
Yep.
Or at least it was this year, and hopefully continues to be so. And that was a place that might be called Silesia, if I pronounce that anywhere near correctly. And some interesting happenings, which is always kind of fun.
Yeah.
You tend to see during this time of year a kind of like a little bit of almost a slight dip in the competitive edge because they're coming off the big championship stuff, and they can't just hold their peak racing shape for like 10 weeks straight. So you'll see a lot of the athletes kind of have a slightly stale couple of weeks as they're kind of recharging and then they jump back out. But didn't seem like it here.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that it's probably strategic. Like at what timing are you going to do that? It depends on how the athlete feels. And that's why it's always important for the athlete to be communicating with their coach and to really try to figure out what's their pattern. You know, how long can my peak be? How long can we extend these things? What do I need to be able to perform maybe in another few weeks at a Diamond League that I would care to do even, better, place better at. So yeah, there's just so many considerations, but we did have really good performances. Sifan Hassan finally was able to claim a win. It seems like it's been a while for her.
Since the Olympics last summer.
Yeah. And she ran the women's 3,000 meter run, and we weren't able to see this event. We weren't able to see, there was nothing posted afterwards. So from what I see, Sifan Hassan ran an 8:39.27 over Taye. And Margaret Kipkemboy was third. So these are names that we are very familiar with. These are top level names.
Are we all very familiar? Well,
maybe not when I say it, but no.
Yes,
but these are really strong performers. So the fact that Sifan Hassan was able to pull out this victory, what I'm trying to say is that this was a significant thing for her after having kind of a rough World Championships.
Yeah, and Hassan was clearly in good shape in the World Championships because she was there in the final moments of both events that she ran, I think, if I'm recalling. Maybe she faded earlier a little bit more in the 5K, but she was there. She just didn't quite have the final lap speed that the others did who beat her. And now this is showing that maybe that's starting to come back a bit too.
Right. So maybe she's
in time for some Diamond League victories here.
For some money. Maybe there's some more money to be won here. It's very possible. I mean, let's be honest, there is more money to be made in Diamond League than in World Championship. So
if you do all of
I guess in the single event, World Championship pays out more. But that's an isolated event compared to all the Diamond Leagues, and then winning the overall Diamond League. Then you earn money from that too. So I guess I haven't done the math.
Since all of you are trying to earn money in the Diamond League, you're very interested in how to do that. But speaking of fast runners in this event, and the 800, and Andy's favorites were coming out.
Ajay Wilson. So Ajay Wilson, we've had her on the podcast. She's, former American record holder, and she's got a lot of accolades behind her. But she was able to win and claim this Diamond League victory, and she just edged out Sage Herda of the OAC for the win, and that was really exciting to see Sage really coming into this Diamond League strong like this. And so it was top two were Americans, so that was really exciting to see in the 800-meter run. And then continuing the theme of really close 800-meter races, because that one was really close as well. The men's 800-meter run was also a battle to the finish, with Emmanuel Carrier winning over Ferguson Rodich by only 400ths of a second.
Wow.
And then Tony van Dijpen of the Netherlands was only 400ths of a second behind Rodich.
So within a single tenth, the top three all finished?
Yep.
That's pretty close together.
Yeah. That's why I wish I saw a regap, because I wanted to see that.
Kenyan countrymen going 1-2, representing what they did in the Olympics last year too, the two of them. So that must have been kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Very fun stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there were other things going on as well on the tune of championship level racing. And so this is one, if you recall, we mentioned Jake Whiteman of Great Britain and his experience specifically after winning the championship, his dad, who is his coach, was interviewed, and it was a very fascinating interview. One of the things they were talking about were coming back off the World Championships to race the Commonwealth Games, which is like right afterward.
Yeah. I didn't know a lot about the Commonwealth Games. I'd heard of it before, but I wasn't super familiar because here in the U.S. we don't participate.
Because we're not part of the British Commonwealth.
Exactly. So,
but for those countries that are,
yeah. Well, I wanted to give
big.
just a couple things about it to help you know more about the Commonwealth Games. It runs every 4 years, and it was first known as the British Empire Games.
Wonder why they changed that.
And then athletes from 72 different nations and territories participated in the 2022 Commonwealth Games, but that did include other sports besides athletics. So I don't know exactly how many were specifically in track and field, but it's a very dense field of really amazing athletes. So those that weren't at Diamond League, it just seems like there were almost all the major players seem to be racing this past week.
Yeah, and it should be noted the Commonwealth Games usually occurs in an off year of World Championships. So there's usually World Championships runs every other year, and the even years are either an Olympic Games year or a Commonwealth Games year. And so the Commonwealth Games are usually the only championship, like major international championship going on that summer. Mm-hmm. But in this instance, it was just a week after World Championships, which is uncommon.
Yep, uncommon for sure. Well, the men's 1500 was a thrill to watch, and we have embedded it at AtoZrunning.com so you can watch it. I would recommend it. It was very fast. For a minute, it looked like it was going to be a replay of the World Championships, just for a minute. And it was an exciting turn of events when Oliver Hoare stormed down to claim the victory in a championship record time. Now, how that happened, Whiteman made a move at 200 meters. It was Chariot who was leading. And
Timothy Chariot of Kenya.
And just like he did in the World Championships. So that's why I was saying it was kind of like deja vu. And he took the lead, but then it was Oliver Hoare on the final curve. He was fifth at the final curve. And then he ended up taking the entire race, and he was not leading the race until he won the race. He was just finished and won.
Well, so Ollie Hoare has a very tactical mind in racing. You can see this anytime he races. He does exactly what he needs to do to be in the best possible chance to win the race. And very rarely does he not execute well. So like when he doesn't win races, it's simply because people just outkick him, outbest him in the moment when he's executing the strategy, or he gets stuck in a bad spot, which is kind of what happened in the World Championships along with a couple of other instances this year. But in this instance, he was exactly where he needed to be in all the right moments, and when it came time down the final straight, he blazed down and trashed everyone. It was quite impressive. It was very impressive.
So Oliver's record time was 3:30.12, and he was 900ths of a second ahead of Chariot and 0.41 ahead of Whiteman.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a close race, exciting one to watch, and I will also link to Oliver Hoare's episode with us. I know I always say this, but I think it's really cool to get into these athletes' heads that we have interviewed on this podcast. So I will link to that as well.
And noted that was the first time since 1958 that a Australian won the 1500 in the Commonwealth Games.
How did you know that?
Because they said it in the video.
Oh, okay. Which, again, I've linked to at AtoZrunning.com. And the women's 800 was very interesting. Wouldn't you say, Zach? It was odd.
It wasn't odd. It was different.
It was different.
The race did not happen the way an 800 usually does.
Right.
And simply because Mary Mora of Kenya went out very fast through the first 400, which sometimes that's an intentional, a deliberate strategy. But in a field like this, you don't want to do that because there's a lot of really fast women in this field. And so what it appeared to be was she immediately decided that was a bad idea and slowed down right away after the first lap. And so everyone starts going around her, and she goes all the way to last place. But she clearly wasn't dying because she held on to the group and just stayed right there. And then, with about 200 to go, she starts moving back up.
Yep.
And then with 100 to go, she starts cutting through the crowd and ends up blazing down Keely Hodgkinson, who should not be outkicked when she's got a lead on someone like that with a final 100. She is one of the better last 100-meter runners in the 800 in the world. And yet, Mary Mora, who just seems to be able to pull it together when she needs to.
I mean, did her little break in the middle of the race help her
nice,
out?
Refreshing pause.
I don't know. It was just such an interesting strategy. It did look like it was possible that that was all intentional like that, but I've never seen an 800 run that way.
No, not like that.
But the times were fast, so Mary Mora ended up running 157.07. That's almost a championship record. So
yeah, Games record's 156.6 something. So that was really good.
You can watch that race. I have that embedded at AtoZrunning.com. And then just one final note that's interesting. Eilish McColgan, she was first in the 10,000 meter run in a Games record time. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of cool. Her mom was a 2-time Commonwealth champion. So she's following in her mother Liz's footsteps. She's broken a lot of her mom's records.
True.
And this year has been crazy with records for Eilish. And then she was second. Eilish was second in the 5,000. She came back to run a really strong 5,000 meter run as well. So I thought that was a interesting side note on the event.
Final interesting note about the Commonwealth Games specifically is that the runners in this particular event represent their precise nationality, not like, well, for instance, so it's not Great Britain, it's England or Scotland. Like they specifically represent that branch. So I find that to be interesting because then, you have runners who, like Eilish McColgan and Keely Hodgkinson, for instance, they're not in the same events, but in the World Championships, they were wearing the Great Britain uniform. But in the Commonwealth Games, England has a separate uniform from Scotland.
Right.
And so they had, something different, which is kind of cool. It's like a more precise flavor in terms of the kind of like cut of all these representations from all these different places.
Yeah, it's neat. And Zach made this comment, but like, it's kind of cool. They get 2 sets of championship uniforms.
They just get more awesome gear.
More awesome gear. Not that we do it for the gear, but the gear is pretty awesome.
Some do it for the gear.
So this last thing is old news, new shoes.
Oh, come on.
Oh, you love it. You love my
I don't.
Titles. Well, this might be old news. For many of us, it's like news because it was kind of glided by. It was not.
Because it's not news. It's just something that happens all the time, and people get mad about it when they want to get mad about it.
So it's about shoes. Shortly, 8 months after the rule that an athlete's shoe must be available to all the participants.
So
Remember
you
that
can't
rule?
run in secret prototype shoes that everyone else can't buy.
8 months after, World Athletics quietly reversed their decision. Now they call it like the development shoe rule. There are still rules about stack height and materials, but an athlete is allowed to wear a prototype that's not available. Maybe not available to anyone else. Maybe it's just them. So
like
it's
Kipchoge
kind of interesting.
and his own unique shoes, which did happen.
Yep. And I wanted to read this part of what the World Athletics issued. The amendment to the rule will allow development shoes to be worn in international competitions and competitions sanctioned by member federations where World Athletics rules are applied prior to their availability to other athletes. That's the change there. Upon approval of the shoe specifications by World Athletics, these shoes will have to meet the same technical specifications as other approved shoes. Yeah. So they can't go crazy, but I mean, there are advancements. And the reason why I found this all out is because Laura Muir was wearing a prototype at the Commonwealth Games, and there was a little, thread on Let's Run. But very interesting. So now you might see shoes that, in races and whatnot that you haven't seen yet. And that's because they are now allowed to wear the prototypes again.
Which just simply brings us back to the way it has always been. And it's for one simple reason. The only reason they changed that rule for a brief period of time there is because Nike was developing some things that nobody else had ever seen before. When they were starting to do that stuff with carbon and the super crazy springy foam, no one had ever seen that kind of stuff before. It was something totally new to the market, and World Athletics wanted to just pause that crazy breakneck speed that Nike was churning out something different all the time, and they were throwing new shoes on people like every month or so, and they were like, this is this is a little too wild. We need everybody to kind of catch up a little bit and figure out what's going on. So they put that rule in place because they didn't even know what was going on themselves. Once they got a handle on what was happening and technologically what kinds of advancements were going on, it goes back to the same old situation, which is, yes, you can put new shoes on your athletes because that's what they do. It's partly because they're getting attention for their brand, and it's partly because they're testing things and seeing how athletes like them and respond to them. And I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, I guess I could see where there would be a debate, though, because then if an athlete is unsponsored for one reason or another, where there's so much that goes into that. It's not just by times anymore. Sometimes it's how many do they have, like, social media following and this and that and the other thing. So
right,
the availability of technology gives an obvious advantage to one athlete over another athlete. So does the contract sponsorship, where they're paying them lots of money and they're giving them free access to facilities, and they're giving them recovery products and things that no one has ever seen before. And I mean, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, Andy, the entire game is built on the premise that some people have and some people don't. And I'm not sure you're ever going to fix that. Gotcha. Well,
unless you get rid of all corporate involvement.
All interesting stuff. Speaking of interesting, this is the end of our episode, and we love to hear from you. So like Zach was saying earlier, communicate. Let us know what you want to hear on this show. Thanks to Andrea for being willing to really share the highs and lows of her journey and bring us through what has helped her be so successful in running. Not just her numbers, not just her performance, but her love for the process and getting back into the sport that she loved after years off. So it was a very inspiring episode. Thank you, Andrea.
Indeed that. And if you need something more than you have right now in your running endeavors and you're not finding it via the places you've looked so far, maybe you should check out AtoZrunning.com. Look for the word coaching, because we may just have a support or service that can benefit you and your work. And even if there's not something quite right there, we certainly would love to interact with you. And so ask a question, share a thought, comment on the stuff.
Yeah.
All the places where people do those things.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.